So a lot of people, if you look into the finances, they speak on the great wealth gap between blacks and whites. Why aren't they on the same playing field? Now the racists would say, well, black people are just lazy. The racists would say black people, all they want is handouts. They don't want to do for themselves. Black people whine and black people just want to be given everything. This is what the racists have to say. And in order for you to understand the argument I'm going to use based on history and based on facts that really even the racists can't dispute, they are the last ones that need to be speaking to black people about anything. Because if anybody got more given to them, more handouts given to them, would be their group. Nobody else has gotten that much before. And we're going to travel back in time. And it will also explain to you what is really white privilege they mention. Because see, a lot of people mention white privilege, but you're not articulating it very well based upon history and fact. So we're going to try to do this in this video. We're going to cover three things that the U.S. government has done to give white Americans an advantage over black people or anyone else. If you travel back in time, you will figure this thing out. Now, the first program that they had to give white Americans an advantage, it was called the Headright System. Now, back in Virginia, 1618, they came up with the Headright System. Now, this system was to give 50 acres of land to every person that's head of the household. And they will usually give them between 50 to 100, but they can give them up to 1,000 acres of land. Now, we know this land was Indian territory. How did they get all this land from the Indians? Well, we know that the Indians didn't have firearms and cannons and all this other stuff. So they slaughtered the Indians and took their land, bottom line, because all this stuff was Native American territory. So if they wanted more people over here that came up with this system and said, listen, if you pay for your voyage to come over here from Europe, we would give you 100 acres of land. You get your 100 acres of land, you could build your farms, you could build your plantations and all this other stuff. And so people got money together and came over here. They got the free land for free, given by the government, completely for free. And they settled here. Now, wealthy people that was already over here, if they brought in servants, indentured servants, and slaves, they would get 50 acres per indentured servant or slaves. That's why they packed those boats so tight on having Africans on top of each other. It's because every African that came over here was 50 acres of land. You know, you get that? So it was a whole lot of money being made on top of the slaves getting here and doing the jobs for free that they did not pay for. Now, you remember when they would say that, well, white people were slaves too? Well, that is more so the Irish that was indentured servants. And those in that time period that came over, a lot of them had came over even with some of the Africans. They had to come work for 5 to 7 years. But they wasn't a slave. Don't get me wrong. They wasn't. But they had to work they dead off. And after the 5 to 7 years, those indentured servants, Irish, a lot of them, was given land closer to Indian territory, like way away from all the white settlers. This is what happened to them. But they still got land after they worked their dead off. But the black man and black woman got nothing but misery, pain, and horror. And of course, this stuff was legal at that time period. Now let's bring us to the second thing that got white Americans ahead, the Homestead Act of 1862. The Homestead Act was given by the U.S. government. You could make application. They had all this land to just give people, and they gave them land, literally. Black people didn't get this land at all. And if a black person possibly was given a land, it's probably one of the ones who were part of, you know, even from slavery time, so you had the black boule, you know, the blacks who are the tokens within their society and they trust and they like and use as a buffer to get a hold to us. But they got ahead by getting all that land. So you had two systems so far that's given nothing but land, and the African didn't get anything at all. In the same year in 1862, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he signed it and freed the slaves. But there were 930 slave owners petitioned the U.S. government for a reparation for those slaves. And the U.S. government gave 930 slave owners the amount of money of $300 at that time period per slave. And the U.S. government paid for close to 3,000 slaves. Now, for every slave, $300 equivalent to our money now is close to $7,200 if you do the inflation calculator. So that's a lot of money that they gave out to them at that time period for losing their slaves. But the black man and black woman didn't get anything. No kind of reparation, no kind of land, nothing. Nothing but death, misery, and pain. Then you come to the most recent thing that happened back in the 1930s all the way up to the late 60s. The redlining program by the FHA and the VA loans, which black people in the military could not get these VA loans. Now, the banks at one point in time weren't lending to nobody, so the FHA, the federal government, came in and said, listen, we'll back this up with our money. So they started giving loans, low interest loans for white people only to get homes because they wanted to create the white middle class. But these white people could not move in certain areas. And so what the banks would do, they would look at the whole city. They'll look at, what they deem as the good areas by color. The blue is the best area. Yellow is kind of declining. They still have some value. And red is the bad areas. And most of these red, they call it redlining on the map. They would say, okay, this is where the blacks at. This is a bad area. This is deteriorating. We don't want you nowhere near them. So you're going to move over here to the blue area. And that's where the whites was moving to. Now, no black people had a chance to move to those blue areas. See, the government even created the ghettos, the slums, because no black family could get those loans at all. They had to stay in those deplorable conditions. They had to stay in neighborhoods that was not good, while the white families was given plenty advantage to move to good areas. Like I said, all the way up to the late 60s. So you look at in history, you've been given land upon land. Slave masters were given reparations, and white families was given homes, very, very low interest when the banks weren't loaning to anybody at all. Then you take a group of people who never was given land, who never had a Homestead Act, who never had a redlining program or even be able to participate in the VA loan program to get homes. And then after that, you want to say to those people who never got into that, they always want a handout. When history shows that who got the most handouts? These people are whining. These people don't work hard. What have you worked hard to do, Mr. or Miss Racist? What have you done? You've given everything in this country. You build everything off of slave labor. Even companies to the existence to this day, at least about 240 companies still to this day, had their ties back to slavery. There's what? Millions of people still in this country that's tied to their old slave money. And then if black people say something about reparations, it's a problem. It's not right. It's divisive. It's not fair. Well, it wasn't fair when you was getting all the land, millions of acres of land. It wasn't fair then either, but that's okay. So when you see these things about wealth gaps and things like that, understand it comes from somewhere. Now, I know what some going to say. I had nothing to do with slavery. I had nothing to do with any of that. Why y'all talking about that? Because everything in this country that's happening today has a lineage to something. So when you say certain things, understand you was given a shot. We wasn't given a shot like that. What? Oh, well, you guys aren't slaves anymore. Oh, okay. Really? We still mental slaves. We still oppressed in a lot of ways. Well, you guys, you're not in the civil rights movement time. No, we're not. But really, has anything changed? Police still killing us. Black people still getting lynched, but they're lying and saying it's suicides. Black people unemployment is high, no different than back, those periods. At least when they had segregation, blacks had more jobs because they had to create their own businesses. Okay, but outside of all that, those excuses, everybody else got reparations. They just gave the Holocaust survivors more money as of recent. President Obama. The Japanese people got money for being in internment camps. They gave them $20,000 each family. Okay, and they didn't go through slavery. It was just internment camps, right? Native Americans was given. I heard a recent lawsuit of $534 million, which they should get that because look what happened to them. But when the black man and black woman talk about reparations, oh no, 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 no. Well, you've been getting reparations ever since you got here, but we can't have anything. And that's the thing. We have to keep researching history to understand the difference. If you really want to bring people together, if you want to stop dividing, well, you know what? You have to make right the wrongs of the past. The wise thing to do is make it right. Do like you done to the Native American and the Japanese, and even the Holocaust survivors. Give what you owe, because really it's what you owe. It's all that free labor. It was free. You didn't pay anything. All the murders, all the things that happened to black people. We have been terrorized more than any group of people. You talk about ISIS. ISIS is nothing compared to slave master. ISIS is nothing compared to even some of these police. What are you talking about? I mean, we've been through so much in this country, and we have to know these things in order for us to learn and grow of ourselves. If we stay in the dark, because they're not going to teach these things in school. They're not going to tell you about the Headright program. They're not going to tell you about the Homestead Act of 1862. They're not going to tell you about the Redlining and VA loan program where blacks can get none of that at all. It was exclusively a racist program. They're not going to tell you that because they would have to tell people that, you know what, we were given an advantage because of the color of our skin, period. And you wasn't because you were black and a piece of crap. They basically would have to say that, but they're not going to say that. And this, what I'm talking about today, you can all go research it yourself. This is about not only educating black people, it's about educating all people to understand why certain things in this country the way it is. So when black people bring up the term white privilege, that's what they're talking about. You were privileged to get everything. You're privileged to be set up in certain areas. Even you're privileged with the benefit of the doubt. You're privileged when you kids do wrong that they can be an individual. But when our kids do wrong, they represent the whole race. Oh, that's how black people are. That's typical of them. But if a white person do it, well, that's just them. That's not all of us. We don't be like that. And if a person do the same thing and make a blanketed statement, then that's so wrong. So it's just things that we have to research and look into. And this is something for you just to be educated on. Because if you really want to, like you say, come together, if you really want to be one people, well, you got to make what's wrong right in order to do that. And if you don't want to make what's wrong right, then it lets you know that you're just an evil person who don't really want to do the right thing. You like the way it is. You like one group being above the other, and you like the advantage of that. And that's fine. You could do that. And I get it. It really doesn't bother me. I've accepted. In this country, there are people who really like the society to benefit one group and not benefit all. I understand that. I am a realist. But what I'm doing is just trying to educate you on what got people in that position. That's all. That way, when these people talk to you again and say something about what you don't do and what you want and handouts, you can say, you know what? Let's talk about all the handouts you got. We'll talk about that. Because really, who's the recipient, biggest recipient of affirmative action? It's not black people. Actually, white women are the biggest recipients of affirmative action. But they don't like to even talk about that, because they would be calling what? Actually researching something for yourself? But that's something we don't do. We just listen to Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, and just whatever they say, we go with it as gospel and not doing anything at all to look into things. So, guys, just make sure you look into these programs, research it, teach it to your children. Let them know the true history of this nation and what the U.S. government has done to give advantage to one group and not the other. So we can understand why we still have some issues to this day, and we possibly, hopefully, one day can fix these issues. But I don't know. Hit me up in the comments, shoot the commentaries, subscribe.